Hi, it's me, Chio. Welcome. So today we will be talking about passive and active voice. There are basically different things that influence grammatical structure and in turn your writing. We have things like past tense, present, first person, second person, third person, etc. But today we'll be focusing on this aspect, the passive and the active voice. So to see how this affects grammatical structure, we have to talk about what it is. The first is active voice. Active voice is when the subject performs the verb's action. And there are some ways it's very obvious, but there are some ways it's not obvious. I won't go too detailed into it because there's so many examples you could bring up about it. But basically, when you're writing a story, you're writing about a character, and that character is generally the subject. For instance, in this scenario, I am the subject and the person is talking. So I am recording this video. That is active voice. So of course, when you're writing, you want to use active voice because basically you're writing from the character's perspective. Mostly you have a main character you write from. So generally you're going to be writing from the subject of the main character, even if it's in first or third person. But sometimes the chapters or scenario requires somebody else to be the subject of the story. Just like that, you write with who the subject is in that scenario. Passive voice, on the other hand, is when the subject receives the verb's action. So even if the subject is who is important in the scenario, the subject is basically the other component there. It's receiving the action instead of doing the action or performing the action. So as I said, when you're writing fiction, specifically commercial fiction, you use active voice instead of passive voice. So these are the three main reasons why you should be using active voice when writing your book. The first reason is because it keeps your story fast and well-paced. And when you're writing a fast, well-paced book, it's because you're seeing the action happening. Basically, you're seeing the story being active. You're seeing the character doing things. You're seeing the character making decisions, etc. So something like Amaka broke the calabash, Amaka went on a journey, Amaka fought the bad guy, whatever. The main character in this scenario is Amaka. She's doing the things. We're seeing her cause the scene to happen. We're seeing her actively do things. We're not just, it doesn't feel like you're hearing about it afterwards. Even when it's written in past tense, it still feels like this person is actually doing these things. And it just keeps the story moving when you see that pace the person is going at. It's fast because they're making decisions and it's just flowing. They're doing this, they're doing that. That is what it is to write a fast, well-paced book. The second is it gives a clear and direct tone. When you write in active voice, it prevents you from being long-winded. It prevents you from being confusing. When you're writing, you don't want to be a writer who confuses the readers because of the choice of words or because of the placement of words. And the third reason is it creates engaging scenes. When your story is fast-paced, well-paced, clear, direct, it ends up being engaging. The reader isn't just looking at the book like something that happened. They are following the story because they are engaged in what is actively happening at that point. So that is what it means to write with active voice. So of course, for the reasons active voice is active and why we should use it is the opposite for passive voice. It's clumsy, it's clunky when you use too many words, because passive voice usually requires you to use more words than necessary. So when you use too many words to describe the scene, when you could explain it with shorter words that are still captivating, that is part of the problem with passive voice. It's also slow paced. Instead of saying something like Amaka broke the calabash, you say the calabash was broken by Amaka. If we're here reading that she broke the calabash, we are following the story. But if you're saying the calabash was broken by Amaka, it feels like this thing that had happened. And lastly, it disconnects the reader. So basically, instead of us following the story through the eyes of the main character or through the eyes of the voice of the book, following through the feeling of the less important people or items in the story, and that disconnects you, because basically when you're reading a book, you're reading it because of what this MC is experiencing. So yes, these are the ways passive voice kind of just dims the light of a story. Of course, with every writing rules, there are exceptions. So there are instances where passive voice is needed, because if it's created in the first place, it must be used, right? So yes, there are different ways you could use passive voice even in fictional books that will still keep it engaging. The first reason to use passive voice is to emphasize the action instead of the subject. Now, as I said originally, you're writing your story from the main character's view or whatever, but there's some times where that character isn't who is important in this dialogue or description happening. Maybe there was a war some years ago, some great war. The action becomes the war itself, and who fought the war is not important. The second reason is to describe a situation where the character is unknown. So let's say, for example, your MC, we've written Amaka, so let's stick to that. Let's say your MC Amaka stole something, but people don't know she was the person who stole the thing. So someone comes in and says something like, the sacred scrolls were stolen. In this scenario, Amaka is the subject of Amaka stole the scrolls, but because we don't know it was Amaka that stole the scrolls, we say the scrolls were stolen. So this is a scenario where the main subject isn't mentioned because it's or she's unknown. The third reason is to withhold information from the reader. It's similar to not knowing who the subject is, but in this instance, it's the writer that is deliberately not telling the reader who the subject is. It's used in a similar way. It can be used for different kinds of books. Maybe you're writing mystery, thriller, or you're planning a huge plot twist. So withholding that subject, withholding who the main bad guy is or who did this and did that is important to keep your reader hooked. And in that instance, use of passive voice will help create that scenario where we don't know who the subject is. Now, these aren't the only reasons to use passive voice. There are other scenarios where passive voice can be used when writing. Is generally what you study, what you get accustomed to, and what you as a writer feels this particular scene in your book needs. But generally stick to active voice when you have an either or option. Stick to active voice. Use passive voice sparingly, because as I said, you want to keep your book fast-paced, engaging, and all of that good stuff. As I said, I wasn't going to go deep into examples of passive voice and active voice. This is a base general description of what they are, and as a writer, you should study in depth on these things, get used to the writing styles, know what it is you prefer, know what it is would push your book further. At the end of the day, this is a general explanation to make you aware of what you could be doing in your book. So that is it for my video today. I hope it's brought you insight into the grammatical structure of passive and active voice. If you weren't aware of them before, I hope that now that you'll be aware of it and able to implement it into your writing the way it suits your writing. And I hope you've enjoyed the video. So if you have liked this video, it's been educational in any ways, don't forget to leave a thumbs up and subscribe. The button right below this video. Hit the button, subscribe to the channel, and be a part of this writing, learning, entertaining journey of mine, ours. And thank you for watching this video. See you next time. Bye.